Hello, this is Miss Jody coming to you from the Akron Fossils and Science Center for Health Class 2019-2020. This is my first video, so it's going to be a little bit corny, I'm assuming, because I don't know what I'm doing, but we're going to give it a try. I think you'd all be very impressed with this little feat of engineering I got going on here for my phone apparatus. And so this little thing is going to be holding my phone, and that way I don't jiggle my shaky hands. And what I thought I'd do is just give you some information as we go along. Obviously we can't meet, and so I was hoping that maybe we could just work on some of our notes and some of our learning by sending you videos and some of the diagrams, and then that way when we get back together we'll be able to work on some of the hands-on activities, enjoy our time together. Hopefully we'll only be out another week or so. I think definitely till April 6th, but hopefully not too long after that. And so when we do return, we could work on all of our things that are more hands-on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be keeping the journals going like we have for our learning type here, or style, or whatever, and leaving spots for our activities as we go along and the diagrams. And then as I send them to you, you can complete the diagrams and the notes, and then when you come back, then I can glue them all in order, and we can make sure that we still have our good system for review that we have in the journals. Now, obviously, when you're taking notes and you look at my notes, I have a whole bunch of extra things, and I don't expect you to write everything down as I go along. I gave a little example here of what a note sheet could look like as we're doing a video today on the systemic diseases and disorders. If you look at my page, I have, let me find it here, a lot of notes. Actually not too bad on this one for this same area, but you wouldn't have to put as many notes. You just kind of go along as you're learning and pick out the things that are important to you. Obviously, if you're taking notes, if you put them on a half sheet of paper, that will work, because then that can be glued directly into the journal. Also, remember to leave space for the label at the top, because that way all of our things in our notes will be consistent, and I already have the labels printed, so I can just go back through and print the, or put them on your little note sheets as I glue them in. Okay, and with the notes, if I send you little diagrams, like this is one specifically for the cardiovascular diseases that we're talking about today, I will be sending this in a PDF form. You can print it out. If you don't have a printer, you could just draw this on a half sheet. And if you can't even do that, if that's hard for you, then you could just take the notes on a half sheet, and then like maybe down in this segment, and we can glue it right over top of here if you don't want to draw out the whole diagram. All right, so hopefully this will be a way for us to continue our learning. Now, sometimes I'll be assigning a video that goes along with it. In fact, this has its own particular video. We're understanding this arteriosclerosis and some of the other cardiovascular diseases. And then also later on there is another diagram, and they're both on the page that I'll be sending to you. And this is on one of the biomedical engineering components to helping with people who have cardiovascular disease, severe. So that way you could understand this particular device by watching a video for it. So that'll be kind of nice, because it'll give you a little break from just constantly hearing me. You can watch the videos, do the diagrams, and since you have lots of time compared to our class segments, you can actually make them all cute with like cute little colors and cute little notes down here, and you know how much that would make me happy. So I'm sure you'll put a lot of effort into it. Now, we, in our health class, we are about, I don't know, maybe halfway through or almost done with Chapter 6. Chapter 6 was on preventing disease. And with preventing disease, we started out with just understanding that we are constantly attacked by pathogens that have the ability to take us down. And remember, the amount is about 1 to 10 million disease-causing organisms that you're exposed to countless ways through inhalation, through nicks in your skin, your digestive system, and yet we only get sick 2 to 3 times per year. So it's a testimony to our powerful system that we have. And so we learned about immunology, and of course, because you guys have already taken AP biology and you knew a lot about the human body, it was kind of nice because we had a lot of good review with that. Now, with infectious disease, that was our first area. We talked about the world of pathogens and the category of diseases. And we also focused on the pathogen that is causing us trouble in our country right now, the SARS-CoV-2 virus that creates the novel COVID-19 disease that we have going on right now. So we were following it back when it was in an epidemic stage, and so has now moved to the pandemic, and obviously it is a spillover, so we were focusing on that also and understanding the spillover world. Now, if we would have continued, our whole map would have been covered by now, because obviously this is a big problem and a very contagious situation. So if you want to continue that, which I suggest that you do, I'm going to be posting some information on that via MedCram. MedCram is a video series that I watch that's updating the situation with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And this particular one that I'm going to post is on what we're starting to understand about the virus and immunity and other ways of testing using the what are they called? Antibodies that we talked about last year in the immunology side of things. So pretty exciting stuff coming out of the research in that area. And so it'd be good for you to continue to follow that. Now, obviously, because you don't have your journal, you can't put notes along the edges like we were doing. But if you want to do little note segments, and we can cut them out and glue them in. If not, we'll just continue some of this stuff when we come back, if we want to add a little bit to that particular study. After that, we went on to immunity and medical defenses, and then finally into non-infectious disease. Now, non-infectious disease obviously is what it says. It's non-infectious, and so you get it not from, you don't catch it. It's not contagious. And so we looked at things in the non-infectious world like hormonal diseases, genetic diseases. If you remember, we spent some time on cancer, immunological diseases, autoimmune diseases, those sorts of things, nutritional diseases. And so there was a lot of information in that. Now, continuing on with that topic, we're moving into the cardiovascular disease world. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, there is a segment in our book that's about disabilities, and you'll see that with the disabilities, a lot of it I felt like was self-explanatory, so I didn't want to do a video on that, but I do have a note page, and I'm going to try to send you pictures of the notes so that there's a still version, so that you can slowly write down some things that you want to write down in your notes. And so there's a whole page on the disability. But most of it was common sense, I feel. And obviously, disability is any condition that hinders a person from performing the ordinary activities. So things like impaired mobility, impaired hearing and speech, and impaired sight. So I thought we probably would just not spend a whole lot of time on that one and focus on the moving on to the systemic diseases and disorders, because those are more, there's a lot more for us to actually learn in those areas. All right, so speaking of systemic diseases, so in the systemic diseases, the main point is if it is a systemic, which I don't ever say my words very well, do I? It's affecting the entire body rather than a single organ or body part. And so whenever you have something that's infecting your entire body, that is something of great concern. And so in this area of studying these particular diseases, we have to be diligent to understand that these are areas we should be working on especially in the area of prevention, because once you have trouble in this particular area, it's going to affect everything. So the first one that we're studying is cardiovascular disease, which is CVD. This is a type of disease that affects the heart or blood vessels. And so obviously, if you don't have your heart, you don't have your blood vessels, you're in trouble, because we are organisms who need to have oxygen delivered to us and waste products removed from us. And so you got to have a system. It is the leading cause of death in the USA and other industrial nations. So it kills nearly 1 million people per year in the US. So this is a big problem. And what's exciting is that you guys are young. And all the years when I was young, I wasn't spending time educating my mind, and neither was anyone else in my life. And you guys who are diligently trying to learn and grow, you're at a great advantage. I never knew anything about health. I never knew, oh, you shouldn't be, living on macaroni and cheese. What? That's something new. So I have a lot of digestive disorders, I think, because of the way that I was raised, and lack of nutritional side of things, and just a lot of things that I think you guys have the ability now, being so young, to take this information and apply it to your life. Like, hey, okay, now I know this is a very important situation. So therefore, I'm going to walk in a lifestyle that is preventative for these areas that could become trouble later on as I get older. Obviously, we can't stop everything, because there's also the genetics and all those things involved, but there is some things that we can do to try to prevent some of these trouble areas. So speaking of trouble areas, hypertension. So these are some of the main areas of cardiovascular disease: hypertension, high blood pressure. Your normal resting rate should be 120 over 80, between 120 over 80 and 130 over 85. If you have high blood pressure at your resting rate, you're going to be 140 over 90 or higher. So if you are testing as high blood pressure, then you're going to have some trouble, because obviously if the more pressure that's going through your tubes, your veins or your arteries, and then even the valves and all that of your heart and the chambers and all that, it can create a troublesome situation. So prevention is healthy diet, weight, and avoiding tobacco. So all of you bad children, stop with your smoking. Just kidding. Do not eat bad food, which we're really guilty of in health class. Me in particular, I'm trying to do a little better with that. And watching our weight, exercising, avoiding any of these types of products that can cause stress on the cardiovascular system. The next, arteriosclerosis, that is the hardening of the arteries. And so this is a gradual degeneration of the artery wall. So gradually we're having a breakdown, causing them to become stiff and hard. There's different types of this, but the most common form is, I won't say this right, but arteriosclerosis. But anyways, I have a video on it. They pronounce it better than I did. And this is fatty deposits building up as plaque. So this little diagram is what goes along with the video. This video, actually I have two videos. One is on this particular situation, so you understand it more in depth. That's the first video. And then the second video is just summarizing the cardiovascular diseases and some of the prevention, some of the biomedical engineering that we have come about, not we personally, but those way smarter than I am, that can just give us an overview. But those two videos go along with this diagram. And of course, I would love for you, like I said, to get some cuties in this little diagram for your little plaque buildup there and your little cute little blood vessels, and put all your little stuff down here for me. That make me very happy. So you'll make sure you watch those two videos. All right, continuing on, we have the coronary artery disease. Now with the coronary artery disease, this is plaque buildup in the coronary arteries. So like the previous page, it's that plaque buildup issue, but in the coronary arteries that causes the blood supply to the heart to diminish, which reduces the heart's pumping abilities. So if the heart doesn't get what it needs, it can't do the pumping to do what it needs to do for everything else in the body, and it can eventually lead to heart failure. So very important. Now this is abbreviated CAD. So the next one, myocardial hopefully I can say this, infarction. Hopefully that sounds good, which is in a general term called heart attack. This is when a portion of the heart muscle becomes affected by a blockage and ceases to beat. Now, what's interesting and to note that this is only a portion. This is when you have damage to a certain area of the tissue, not the entire heart. And that's sometimes not understood in the cardiovascular world. Then there's cardiopulmonary arrest. That's cardiac arrest. That's when you have a sudden stop in effect in normal blood circulation due to failure of the heart to pump. So when somebody goes into cardiac arrest, there's an actual stop, not just a blockage. Then there is cardiarrhythmias, and that's normal rhythm of the heart becomes impaired. So the normal beats, they become impaired. Missed beats, extra beats. This ventricular fibrillation, that's when the heart ceases to beat and instead it quivers. I'm sure you've heard of that before. When people have trouble with overdose or they go into shock and the heart begins zzz, kind of a quivering thing instead of an actual beat, creating the actual circulation that they would need. You can get that from electrical system problems of, your own electrical body, shock, those sorts of things. And then we have congestive heart failure. This is when the heart is too weak to maintain normal blood circulation. Therefore, blood accumulates in the veins, in the capillaries, causing bloating. Now, this isn't your normal bloating, like, oh, I'm bloating and my pants are too tight. This is bloating of the body that is going to be very dangerous. It can create excessive blood in the lungs because of the not moving through the way that it needs to. It's almost, and you think of the word congestive, you think of like when you're very congested, it's like thick and mucusy. It's almost like that in a sense that the blood is causing like a sort of a drowning type feeling. Excessive blood in the lungs can cause plasma to leak into the alveoli. Now, if you remember studying the alveoli and how small they are and the pneumonia world and all that kind of stuff, I might post a video on understanding what the world of pneumonia, really, since it goes along with the SARS-CoV-2 virus that creates that terrible pneumonia, and then also just understanding that situation here with congestive heart failure, so we could understand that a little bit better. So they leak in the alveoli, causing pneumonia like lung congestion. So it's like the regular pneumonia situation, and there's that congestion, difficult breathing, lots of problems with congestive heart failure. This is cerebrovascular accident, so which we call a stroke. The next one, CVA. So if somebody has a CVA, a vascular accident, it's when a blood vessel in the brain ruptures and becomes clogged, interrupting the supply of oxygen-rich blood to the brain. And a very dangerous situation. This is what happened to my sister last year or 2 years ago. And if you read more in the book about what happens, it's like to the T, the signs of it, of what my sister went through, and not being able to speak, and losing her vision, and all the sorts of things that you don't really even think of until something like this happens. Now, there's 3 different areas that are highlighted with this particular accident situation. Thrombosis is when, and you'll see in the book, it gives a kind of a nice diagram. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is here, where it will show us that when the blood is flowing, if a blood clot develops and it obstructs the blood flow, we call that a thrombus. So this could be in these blood vessels in the brain and creating this particular problem to create a CVA, an incident, an accident that's going to cause trouble. And so you can have a thrombus, or you could have, and I'll put these right here just for good illustrations. And let's see, so that one's the thrombus one. The embolus, which is blood clotting, traveling through the bloodstream. And so as it's traveling through the bloodstream, it might be fine going through this particular tube, but as it moves through and starts to go through here, it might block this, and the clot obstructs the blood flow in a smaller vessel. That's an embolus. And then an aneurysm, which you're probably very familiar with hearing that term, a weak spot in the artery that develops and balloons outward. So a weak part of the vessel doesn't have the ability to hold the pressure of the blood as it's coming through because it's a weakened spot in the tissue there. And so it kind of balloons out, and then eventually, if it bursts and the blood, it diverts the blood flow outside of the tubes, which is not a good thing. You can have bleeding and on the brain, very, very dangerous situations, all of these. And those go along with your cerebrovascular accident, which we know of as stroke. All right, and then last but not least, this is the diagram for a device. It's spelled LVAD, and it's kind of like an artificial heart. It's called the left ventricular assist device. And it's pretty interesting, the biomedical engineering that they've come up with to figure out how to insert this into your body and help you keep doing what you need to do when your heart begins to weaken. Now, this is just one of the biomedical engineering feats of our combined intelligence here in our world. But this one in particular I thought was pretty interesting. But there's a ton of other things like the stents and stuff like that that they can use to help with people who have cardiovascular disease. This one has its own video for you to watch. And again, make sure you do cute little doodaddies and all this little fun stuff that you're going to just thrill me with. And then we'll be putting that in there. So that ends the talk on the cardiovascular disease for health. We will be continuing on, and my next video will be moving on in Chapter 6 to the side of the skin world and the diseases that go along with the skin, the non-infectious diseases. So we'll be looking at that. That should be fun. It's got acne and all kinds of fun stuff in there. We'll see what we can do with that little doodaddy. But until then, hopefully you're having a wonderful time with your family and you're still trying to learn, and I cannot wait to see you again.